We're particularly thinking today about the possibility of change inherent in a life guided by the Holy Spirit. Change in us as individuals, but change that impacts those around us. Every year we mark the coming of the Holy Spirit at Pentecost. And we remember especially this day how Jesus left the Spirit with us and how powerful the Holy Spirit is and how it works in us if we're open to it and how it impacts in us, not in isolation, but to impact on those around us. In that reading we had from Acts, we had the disciples gathered together in one place when the Spirit lighted upon them dramatically. This event is described really graphically in that passage from Acts to try and get across what an incredible event it was. There's a noise like a tornado blowing through the room and a roaring fire that appeared from nowhere and spread onto the heads of those present. And then all of this had an amazing tongue-loosening effect on those gathered. Lots of different languages being spoken out in wonder and amazement. And this, in turn, had an impact on those gathered around and attracted a big crowd. It must really have been pretty chaotic when you think about it. But the good news of Jesus Christ was very effectively shared that day. As the meeting of the faithful burst out onto the streets and ended up as a huge, noisy gathering somewhere in the temple precincts, think about that noise, all those different languages being spoken all at once, and then gathering as Peter talked to the crowd. However we look at this, there was an outpouring of the Spirit that worked in some people, and it worked in them for others from far and wide, so the movement of the Spirit spread. Our gospel reading that we've just heard from John describes the coming of the Spirit slightly differently. We're back in the upper room, taking us back to the action on the first Easter day, 50 days ago. In the evening, when the disciples were locked in the upper room for fear and trepidation, for most of them this occasion was when Jesus appeared to them for the first time after his resurrection. And as they were together, Jesus breathed on them with the Holy Spirit. The gift of the Spirit was given to them for a purpose, for others too. Jesus said, "I am sending you." Not, "I'm giving you this amazing power just to keep for yourselves," but to the disciples and to us, "I am sending you." He then talked about forgiveness, which was a key to what they would be sharing with everyone they met, which in our spiritual journeys must also be one of the key visible features of our approach to life and to those around us. Our lives need to show forgiveness, and where we need to seek forgiveness. But we also need to be pointing people to the loving heart of God and the forgiveness and endless mercy available for those who turn to God with their hearts. And in that turning, the hope that brings and the meaning and the purpose that brings to lives. Approaching life and the significant things that happen to us within it as an individual, set apart from those around us, or even isolated from those around us, or letting our needs be more important than the common good. All of this is a much more modern approach to life than the life that Jesus would have experienced. And frankly, our desire to be isolated and to only think of ourselves is not helpful. It's partly come about because of all our technology and developments. We can now manage to do many things that it would have taken an army of people to do manually in the past. Beware of life lived dictated to by our smartphones, with it dictating the pace to us, not us using it as a tool or an aid. Living isolated from each other has also partly come about by us prizing our independence, looking after number one, as the saying goes, rather than being part of a community. God's understanding of the human condition is that we are not designed to be self-sufficient like this. We're designed to be creatures who live in a community, in deep relationships with each other, to provide the companionship and care and practical help and support that we need. We absolutely gain in our relationships. And at the workshop day that was running here yesterday, I ran a session on team working, and I said what I often say about the word team, that it stands for together everyone achieves more, because we do need to relate to one another. We also have to understand in our Christian journey that being a Christian means having a church family. The sentence, I am a Christian, but I don't do church, I find that a very difficult thing. There's a vast community element to our faith. We are meant to practice our faith and gather together and build each other up and encourage one another. It's not just a private matter just for us. It's important to be a community in our learning and growing together, but also in our reaching out to others. Like those first disciples, our spiritual growth changes us to help us to share God's love with others. Doesn't change us in isolation. In the history of the Christian church, even the church fathers, who were desert monks, understood this. They lived in circumstances like this, and though they lived isolated from each other a lot of the time, they were still part of a wider community and needed each other, and they knew that they needed each other. For Barbara Brown Taylor, the need that they and we identify in having a communal life together was thus: at the very least, most of us need someone to tell our stories to. At a deeper level, most of us need someone to help us forget ourselves, a little or a lot. Our wisdom traditions recognise that one of the main impediments in our modern life to living a life of meaning and purpose is being too self-absorbed. It is hard and spiritual work to love our neighbours as ourselves, but it's the work that the Spirit does in us. And to do this, to love our neighbours as ourselves, we have to have neighbours and companions on the road to encourage us. Remembering, like those first disciples and the first followers of Jesus on the Feast of Pentecost, remembering that our spiritual growth changes us to help us share God's love with others. Encountering people fully and loving them as they are requires us to approach everyone as the unique individuals that they are and what they can bring to us. This kind of deep encountering makes us look at our motivations and where we're starting from, and helps us to think about how God inspires us and works through us in our encounters. The point of loving our neighbour is really to see the person in front of us and to see the presence of God working and inspiring them. The point of loving our neighbour is to really see the person in front of us as a unique child of God, just like us, as a person who has no substitute, just like us, and can never be replaced, whose heart, like ours, holds things for which there is no language, and whose life, like ours, has some unsolved mysteries about it too. Our neighbours have specific gifts and talents which are just theirs, just like we have specific gifts and talents that are just ours. And critically, this may help us to get beyond ourselves too. Just look around for a moment at the people here this morning and wonder. And thank God for them and the encouragement that they are and they will be to us all. And then in your mind's eye, think of those beyond that we encounter, our friends and our families, the people we work with, the people we share our community with, those with whom we have deep relationships and can have deeper relationships. Those that God has given us, and let's thank God for them too. The kinds of encounters we've been talking about are the kind that were going on when the Spirit came at Pentecost. Each person caught up in the Spirit at Pentecost had a role and a purpose, and they were there so that someone else could understand the good news of Jesus Christ. We have people around us helping us to understand the good news of Jesus Christ, and things to learn of God and to see in God, in them and through them, as we get beyond ourselves. But we also have people we are helping to understand and to see God in them, and also helping us to get beyond ourselves. The assignment we have from God is to love God wholly for who he is, and to not restrict God's power in our hearts and our lives. That's what loving God with your heart, soul and mind means. And of course, to love our neighbours as ourselves. Living in an open-hearted way like this teaches us the things we need to know and leaves us open to interact and to expect the unexpected. After all, the disciples on the first feast of Pentecost were not expecting to turn into great linguists. They didn't wake up that morning and think, I'm going to speak whatever language was given to them to speak. They were not timid or frightened or fearful, but they got caught up in the moment like we need to. And they got caught up and they got powerfully used by God. God's Spirit is not ours to tame or to confine to what we think we want. This would just be as ineffective as King Canute was when he commanded the waves to stop. We can't domesticate God, and I'm really glad that we can't. We can't bring God down to our level and our limitedness. We have to work with and be used by God, being open-hearted and open to his power. Being open-hearted and open-minded will enable the Spirit of God to really live within us and move within us. And our spiritual growth, like those first disciples, is used to bring the good news to others. I'm the first to admit that this approach to life is not likely to take us where we thought we may have wanted to go, because it opens out to us the plan that our awesome, majestic God has, and all his perspectives of timelessness and eternity. But it will take us to a place of deep meaning and deep hope. In the next few weeks, we're going to start looking at the fruit of the Spirit working in us in the weeks ahead. We'll be looking at these, informed by the journey that we've been on, looking deeply at the resurrection of Jesus Christ, and thinking about how God works in us through his Holy Spirit and how it came at the first Pentecost. Part of the challenge is to live open to the Spirit with God's heartbeat in our lives, and to live through his Spirit which dwells within us, to reach out with the good news of Jesus Christ to those around us. And this is a Spirit that aches to take us to a place of renewing and refreshing and the abundant life God has for us all in all its fullness, its creativity, and its freshness for us. Amen.